And hello, Ninth Age community. This is Charles Evershade Gaming, and I've got a review of the Background Compendium. So this is a new thing coming out for the Ninth Age that's being released today, March 10th, and this is a supplement. Seems almost doesn't seem like a strong enough word, because this is quite a big, I would say, thing for the Ninth Age to have a not entirely fleshed out background, but definitely a lot more meat on the bone after something like this. And so this is a background compendium, which, as it suggests in the title, is simply providing lots of different background on all sorts of different things. So here we're looking at the contents, and we can see there's a little bit about each faction in the Ninth Age. I'd say the purpose of this is sort of to give a lot more context to the world, more than just the individual races. I think the labs are still the primary way in which the narrative of the different sort of Ninth Age armies is expressed. The current labs that have full books are Warriors Dark Gods, the Demon Legions, the Infernal Dwarfs, those full lab and those full lab books, those, they tell the story of those armies very well. Similar to Undying Dynasties and Sylvan Elves, they sort of have, their own background books, but they're not labs yet. What I actually really found probably most interesting more than anything was I enjoyed the history of the Ninth Age, which was told by a goblin, which was amusing. And then the world sections were actually also very nice, and that they gave a lot more sort of substance, I think, to imagining what the world would be like. Sort of helps place yourself in it a little bit better. So the purpose of this video is to tell everyone, hey, there's a cool background compendium that's coming out for the Ninth Age, but also just to provide some highlights for it. I'm not simply going to read through it all. I'm going to leave that up to you, dear viewer, or dear listener to this video, but I do want to lift up a few of my favorite things. So this is told in the kind of the typical Ninth Age fashion through a sort of a writer. There's somebody who's writing this compendium besides our faithful background team, Mr. Edward Murdoch and all sorts of those other guys. But the sort of fictional person is somebody putting together an atlas. What is that? Mr. Johannes Starbo is our writer and editor of a atlas or history of the Ninth Age world, and it has sections devoted to every single army. Kind of these sections of the text, I would say, are sort of like the more like fact-based things that are like, okay, that's probably definitely the truth of that race, and then these sort of other sections are more like there's probably some truth to them, but they're also more narrative in scope. So some of these are like chants or poems. Other ones are like, there's lots of letter telling, still present in all these narratives. Yes, and they start sort of telling a bit about the race like that. So you'll find a little section like that for every single army. Yeah, it's I've read through all the factions that I play, and I enjoyed them. The Dread Elf one, the Empire Sonstal one, the Ogre Khans one, and I haven't hit all of them. I actually really enjoyed the Highborn Elf one. I love how the Highborn Elves are becoming British in the Ninth Age world, and sort of this have this glorious empire that spans from all over the Ninth Age world. But yeah, everyone's got a little something. There's all these sort of other human races that don't have a sort of Ninth Age playable army or supplement. Well, I guess there's the Asklanders have their own supplement. These Volskaga or are sort of like your mm, sort of Kievan Rus people, kind of Kislev probably people from old Warhammer fluff. They seem to be close to the Makar steppe and not part of the Empire Sonstal. But then you have these other ones. These ones, they're Archalia and the Destria. They're sort of like in the south of the continent with most of the humans, and they're kind of your more mercenary sort of groups of kind of cultures where there's more city states. So, yeah, some interesting human fluff expansion. Some really cool new art. I really like this piece right here, this poster about some educational opportunities for Sonstallers. I thought was really cool and very nice looking. Yeah, nice little fluff sections on every different race. A little section about dragons and giants, which do share an interesting relationship to every army now, especially with the giant supplement. There's even a sort of a giant life cycle where they're born, they travel, they bond, they depart, they come home, and it's so beautiful, isn't it? Giants and their life cycles. Uh, Again, this is a beautiful art piece that we're very familiar to. And yeah, this is the history of the Ninth Age, which is again, it's actually told by, I think it's supposed to be told by the goblin that's like the mascot. Yeah, Kepler. He's the mascot of all the Ninth Age. So it's sort of amusing and it's very tongue in cheek. This also gives a very, I guess, cosmic overview of sort of the Ninth Age fluff and its different the different phases of the way the world has developed. With it starts with this Dawn Age in which the Saurians are in power, has a Golden Age in which sort of when you think about your highborn elves and your or just, I guess your elves in general and your dwarves being very prosperous. Um, it kind of goes with some of those classic fantasy tropes where the elder races had a lot of power, and then things get terrible. You have Age of Death, Age of Iron, Age of Plague, Age of War, and war only keeps increasing in all of these ages. And it's interesting. It's not until the Eighth Age, the Age of Waste, which is again the Sixth Age of Ruin, though, where Suna is actually even present in the narrative. So she's actually quite a recent thing. And one of the things I learned in this is that the Empire Sonstal is only 200 or so years old, which isn't quite all that old at all. It's actually sort of a recent power in the world. I thought that was quite interesting, a lot different. Yeah, and this is where I learned newest power, but rose real fast. Sonstal was founded for all the great stuff someone did in the past, but they're trying hard to make new things. Again, that's the voice of a goblin. Um, yeah, so just lots of fun stuff. Some sort of calendar and days, and which I think is a little niche in sort of its application, but it's always fun. A nice, really new map. I did really like this. It's a little sad that there's like this great white streak running through it, and that it's kind of folded. But I'm hoping that after this background supplement comes out, that this map will be available just as a PDF, all together. Because I thought this was a very beautiful map that shows you Sunstal, shows you Equitane. So that's like Destria is kind of like one of those other human kingdoms that isn't quite all that powerful, but still sort of plays into the politics of both of these two greater kingdoms. And Vetia Wiskin right here is actually a land of it's sort of the main Sylvanel forest. Yeah, and Sylvanels are actually spread all over the world, and in the Ninth Age fluff are the oldest elves, which I thought is all very interesting. And I actually think makes more sense from a fluff perspective, since they're the sort of the most primitive elves too, in that they more in touch with nature than their other elf brethren. So yeah, and then this world section is also very nice. It really dives into the sort of the history and the people living in each of the sort of great continents of the world. And this section really, I actually thought this was probably the best section, because it gave like both history, but it both gave, like kind of the factions you could find in certain places, which I think one of the things that the Ninth Age likes to do is sort of have factions all over the place, or have a faction represented all over the place, to sort of give folks a reason to build narrative games like that. Which, I mean, if you remember, in Warhammer fluff, it was pretty. You kind of have to stretch the imagination sometimes, for certain folks to fight. Um, like it was always a question of why is somebody fighting Undying Dynasties, and it's, well, they must be there, right? Because that faction almost never left, like the desert in that part of the world. Whereas now it's like, you probably actually have a lot more factions around that area. I still don't think they're that much of a traveling faction. Yeah, I think, there's outposts. The Empire Sunstar probably has outposts in Selexia, and the Dread Elves have outposts in Vetia, and so the Highborn Elves, and the wastes spread, quite far along the north of the world, and giving the warriors sort of access to fighting anybody. So it's pretty interesting. And yeah, actually, I really enjoyed the Vetia section. Some interesting sort of discussions talking about the sort of the politics and the sort of the warring between the Sonnstallers and the Equitanes. Contains some of the Equitane nice fluff that I feel like we've sort of heard about with their new lab, about like how their land is so steeped in magic, and why that is. Yeah, and it's interesting. There's like these nice natural boundaries between Equitane and the Empire Sonstal. One being the forest of Wiskin, where the Sylvan Elves reside. So you got these white mountains, and then this forest right here, and then you have like these couple border cities, and these border cities end up like, or towns end up basically switching hands between Sonstal and Equitane as they're sort of fought over, and one faction gains, enough influence to control them. And I think we've kind of, especially those who know maybe the history of Europe, or other parts of the world, are familiar with towns that have cultures that are mixing melting pots, because they've had one country control them for this many years, and then another country control them for this many years. I thought that was a nice sort of reflection on our own world, but also very much still steeped in the fantasy world. So, and yes, as they say, all roads lead to Avarice, which still is holds quite the center of imagination for the Ninth Age world, and it's both its importance, but also in its sort of mythological representation and obsession by certain factions. Like the Empire Sonsal is obsessed with it. Even the Aquitanians kind of have some important relation to it. The vermin, their whole thing is they're mocking, or sort of not intentionally mocking, I think, but have created a mocking representation, twisted representation of that old world. And this background supplement ends with just sort of a brief, but I thought thorough discussion of the sort of the magic and the way the veil works, and mortal. And I thought that was also quite very interesting. I liked the descriptions of the lores right here, where souls and spirits, that's evocation, witchcraft, shamanism. Matter and energy is alchemy, pyro, and druidism. Power and knowledge is divination, thaumaturgy, and occultism. And then the universal truth lore is cosmology. I thought that was all very, very cool descriptions of the paths, and how they're, sort of interconnected. And it's interesting thinking about how factions have access to different paths and why. And I think that'll be continue to be explored as certain factions get their labs and as things continue to sort of change a little bit. So yeah, and this was honestly like kind of going over it. This was a pretty fast review. I think there's a lot more that could be dug into. Certainly, there's a ton here in this background supplement, in that every race has got a little something to add, and then there's some really nice overviews of the world and sort of the history. Yeah, just a great sort of compendium to anyone looking for more background. I feel like after reading the little introductions for each army, my hope is that those just get copied and put into the slim books, because I feel like they just have a nice little breadth of background that anyone that's sort of looking wants to know a little bit more about their faction but doesn't necessarily might want to find another book will just find it right there. But I don't know if that'll happen, but I something I would recommend. So but everyone, I want to thanks for watching. Feel free to peruse this at your leisure on the 10th, which is today, and I'll see you soon for some more Ninth Age battle reports and Ninth Age content.